Carla Kelly is a veteran of the New York and international publishing world. The author of more than 44 novels and novellas for Donald I. Fine Company, Signet, Cedar Fort, Camel Press, Harlequin. Carla is the recipient of 2 Rita Awards from Romance Writers of America, 2 Spur Awards from Western Writers of America, 3 Whitney Awards, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from Romantic Times. She has a BA and MA in history. Carla Kelly.
And after all that, I still have to stick this thing in the back of my butt. You can hear me. And there's no dignity in life. Like Jennifer said in the earlier presentation, this is such an unnatural setting for a writer, because you guys are writers, you typically hole up in a corner and everybody leaves you alone and you do your thing and you don't talk to people about it. But that's what we do. Now then we do this sort of thing. I mean, I got the email from Jason and I thought, yeah, I'll do that. Jason, then I afterwards said, done. It's what people do when you think about these things. And choosing the right words is or choose the right word. What I call this, because of where we live. I live in Idaho Falls. We've been there about 4 years. Before that, we lived in Utah. My husband taught at a university in North Dakota for 13 years, and I was in the Park Service up there. So then we moved. We're not good at retiring. We finally found the right place. Anyway, and I often in groups like this, I want to ask, and I almost want to ask, what do you want to know? I've been doing this a while, but I'll tell you what I think you want to know, or I hope you want to know, and we'll have time for questions, because it's important. And I'm not even sure what time this, I need a high sign. Oh, I think I have, excuse me. What did I do? Oh, 1 o'clock. Find it. What time is this session? Boiling down and over.
1:20.
1:20. So, I'll sneak a peek at my phone every now and then. Okay, a couple things. When you want to be a good writer, a good reader, be a good writer, first thing you have to be is a good reader. I assume you're all good readers. You're reading. And then I asked, what did you read? If you're like most writers, you read everything, because everything interests you. Truly it does, that's the cool thing about writers. When kids are little, they're generally interested in everything. Writers never get rid of that. You're always interested in stuff. And people are usually willing to tell you stuff if you say, hey, I'm interested in your stuff. People like that. So I read in so many different, mostly I read nonfiction. Typically I do. I was listening to a book on the way here. Some of you are probably familiar with Craig Johnson. He writes the Longmire series of wonderful stories. He's a good writer. And I was listening to a fairly new one called The Western Star, and listening to it as I drove down here from Idaho Falls. And I was struck by the fact that he never wastes a word. He's not a poet. Poets don't waste words. They just find the right word. But he never wastes a single word. And so the more I'm listening, the more I'm appreciating what he's saying about that. So be economical, really, in what you're wording, what you use as words. Of course, we all write differently. Now, in high school, I went to a very good high school in South Texas, just a public school in a small town in South Texas. But we happened to have a journalism teacher. She was a dragon. She was the meanest woman that ever lived. She made us work. She was hard. She was mean. She'd turn in something and it was full of red stuff, and she'd fling it back at you and say, I hated her until about the end of my sophomore year, when I realized I had that epiphany, and I didn't get lucky. And I said, if I listen to this woman, this dragon, this plague of my life, I will be a writer. And so I started listening, and I became a writer. So what I do, I got a couple degrees in history, it makes me a historian, but what I do, I learned in high school. How many times can we say that anymore? I don't know, I really don't know. But man, I've never regretted that. Horrible, mean woman, and when she died, I went to her funeral, and there were 450 of us that learned how to write from that woman. Just were there, you know, in the country at the time. And yeah. But so I learned from a very hard taskmaster. And another thing true about life, the more you live, the better you'll write. You know, I'm not saying that young people can't write good, and many do write well. Anyway, but the more you live, the better you'll write. So don't spend all your time in that little closet writing away. Get out there and see the world if you can, or even just do things. I was, when we lived in North Dakota, I had a couple things. I was ranger in the Park Service. Then for 4 years, I was a writer for a small New York, a small daily newspaper in a little town called Valley City. Wonderful place. And I was, you know, I was a grandma by then, or getting up there, and here I am on a Lake Ashtabula, with the guys from the Fish and Wildlife, and they're catching female fish. They're milking the roe, and we're doing this on a raft, and we're like this, all of us, and I'm trying to take pictures, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? But I would not trade that experience for the world. I wrote a really great feature about these guys that go out there in this raft and everything. Oh, yeah, it was cold, and oh man, would I do it again? Yeah, even now I would. So the more you live, the better you'll write. And this number 2 is so true. If you think there is no time to write now, there never will be. Never. And this is tough. A lot of us are, well, I started writing my first important, to me, short story that sold, it was 1977, I'd written some before. 1977, some of you weren't even born then. And my littlest daughter was, she was I think 4 months old. But I wrote this story, and it's since been anthologized in several places, a story called Mary Murphy. It's still in the collection. People ask me, what's my favorite book? Well, that's like asking who's your favorite child, you know. Because you like this one for this reason, this one, and you know, it's just the way it is. But if I had said, I'll wait till all my kids are grown, I wouldn't have written a word beyond that. So yeah, this is something that bothers women probably more than men. Your commitment is to your family, yeah, but somehow you have to find the time. The first novel I wrote, this novel, well, I called it Saint Maker, but that's in the magic of the publishing world. They changed it to some sexier Daughter of Fortune. This is a reprint. If you hang around long enough, I'm 70, and people read your stuff, it'll get reprinted. But I go, okay, I was in, this is so dropping it. I was in Santa Fe picking up my second Spur Award for a short story I'd written. And I'm coming back, and it's Santa Fe. I'd never been there before. And like I say, I'm a historian, so I walked around town for a while with my mother. She came to, so that's a nice thing. She came, and we were walking around Santa Fe just enjoying it. And I knew there was an incident in 1680, Pueblo Indians had an uprising in the colony of New Mexico. And I couldn't remember the name of the Indian that led the uprising. Now, what does that matter? Not a bit. But I'm wandering around, finally, late in the afternoon, and Pope was his name. I was so happy. But that's because we're nerds. But on the way home, on the flight home to Ogden, I got this great idea for a novel set there in 1680 when that Pueblo uprising. And I thought, wow, I can, and I'd written a number of short stories by then, plenty of them, because I'd gotten that second award from short stories. But anyway, and so, yeah, my kids are little, they're all home. And so what did I do? I was working full time too. So what did I do? You get up early in the morning, and I wrote in the furnace room, because it was quiet, I could close the door, on the typewriter. Remember those? And my feet are cold, because I never bothered to get socks on or anything. And there I am. So yeah, I'd get up early in the morning. I'd write, not late at night because I was too tired. Saturdays, I'd go into work if I could, if I, had some time, somebody was able to watch my kids for a little while. Yeah, so you do that, because you have to write, you have to. So I did that. Okay, so choosing, I'm getting to the right where honestly we are. And you have to learn to develop the ability to create something from nothing. That's a little simpler when you write historical fiction, because you have a frame, typically, on what to hang your story, but the story is still yours, completely. But but you have a framework. Those that write contemporary fiction, I think they're writing more something from nothing. But, so you spend your free time imagining novel situations. And I'll tell you how one reason I did it. One way I was talking to my friend Rita Smith this morning about that. I still do my dishes by hand mostly. There's two of us at home usually. And, but I do all the dishes by hand. My kids knew to stay away because if they came in the kitchen, I'd grab them and put them to work. But I used that time to think, and nobody bothered me. I washed those dishes so carefully you wouldn't believe it. They were cleaner. Yeah. Because that was my time to think when I had 5 kids. So yeah, that's when I did my imagining my novel situations. You look for ideas that have deep roots in your heart. Something, some event, whether it's historical or modern, doesn't matter. The key to this is remembering how you felt about something. I wrote a novel a couple years ago called Softly Falling. It was a title picked by a committee. I didn't like it, but it made some sense later on. I made sense later on. But it was based on something that happened to me when I was a ranger at Fort Union. Fort Union Trading Post National Historic Site is on the Montana-North Dakota border, and I mean on the border. Parking lots in Montana, forts in North Dakota. It was the John Jacob Astor Fort, 1828 to 1866. And the fort itself, it's right on the Missouri River. The fort itself was on a bluff overlooking the Missouri, and the parking lot, I said Montana parking lot, is lower. So it's a bit of a hard slog to walk up there. You follow a curving path through the Park Service. It's, there's all kinds of asphalt and lots of concrete. Good path. You walk up there to the fort. And not a big deal, but I'd go out, I worked there totally in the summers, and then I'd come back in the winters for special projects. And one winter I was back there, we were organizing an elder hostel program, dealing with Lewis and Clark bicentennial coming up. And so I was back there at Ford, and I had a meeting in town related to that. And the ranger offices are downstairs in the visitor center, no windows. And I came upstairs, it was a whiteout. There was snow everywhere in the middle of winter. And I thought, I'd have this meeting in town, gotta get there. So I started out, took the main gate, you take the back gate. Took the back gate, I knew right where the path was, you couldn't see anything. And I'm walking on the sidewalk. I turned too soon. And I found myself, seconds later, it seemed like forever, out in the field. And I didn't know where I was. Did not know where I was. It was terrifying. Because I know that fort, I know that road, I know that path, but I had gotten off it because I turned too soon before the curve. I just said, okay, Carla, this is Tracy. You know the fort, wherever it was. You lose all sense of direction. And so I just stood there saying, please, Lord. And, because it can be scary, you can wander off, you can die. But it wasn't that serious. It felt like it at the time. So I just turned a little bit, not a lot, and traced my way until I felt that concrete again of the path. Then I walked, I made the curve that time, and then I could tell when I stepped off the curb to the parking lot. And by the time I got to the fort's exit, or entrance, the road was clear. It's the oddest thing, but that happens in North Dakota. Okay, I thought, I gotta use this somewhere. You don't want to waste an event like that, that terror, where am I? So I've been interested in Wyoming ranching. I wrote 2 novels, Borrowed Light and Enduring Light, about ranching in Wyoming in 1909, 1910. But so it interests me, and I've been interested in something called the Big Die-Off. It was 1886 to 87. when basically all the cattle in the couple state area died because it was a winter that never ended, just never ended. We've had them around here. And I thought, man, that would be a great story. I want to do that, so I had some good research, got that going, and I used that event in the book. Because that was if that hadn't happened to me, I don't think I ever would have written Softly Falling. But yeah, there's one point where someone is very lost, and there's no help if you can't help yourself. So yeah, look for those ideas that land in your heart and stay there, because you never forget them. And ideas either age like fine wine or they rot like potatoes every time. So if you have time, we don't have a lot of free time, do we? There's nobody in here that has free time, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. We're busy. Jot down ideas in a notebook. Think about them. Let them kind of gel in your mind a bit. And how long you think about them is your business, because you know time goes on. I write under contract, so I need to have an idea, need to move on it fairly quick. So I get a stockpile of ideas and pull one out that I think I might want to do. A lot of reasons how that works. Some ideas will begin to gel. Jennifer was talking about the War of 1812. She's got, you said a series? Okay, she's got more than one idea going on here in that same range, because she's doing the smart thing. What you do when you write, well, I started writing Regencies years ago for Signet. I was one of the early Signet writers there, and you get kind of typecast, sadly. But you do a ton of research at first about this subject. But the more you write in that genre, that period, both of it, the more you already know. So you can pull in this information and you don't. So I would never just write one novel about one subject. Use that research again. So your ideas gel, and some stay, some just go away, they vanish. And I'm at the age now where I'm thinking, I bet I won't have time to write this and this and this, but you never know. So you accumulate a fair amount of ideas at this point. I do this. I got 4 ideas kind of hanging out right now that I'm probably going to write. I'll probably write all 4, but the order depends. Okay. Now, when you're finding this right word, and it's something Jennifer mentioned, help your readers see exactly what's in your mind. The art of creative fiction is transmitting the images in your mind and feelings in your heart to your readers. This is a no-brainer. And it involves the senses. Make your readers smell, feel, hear, taste, touch the words you are creating. It's also important. This takes work, takes a lot of writing. There are no shortcuts. I wish I could give you a magic pill or shortcuts to writing, but this is one. I remember something on Facebook, somebody had asked, what odors do you remember from your childhood? And one popped into my mind immediately. It was the smell of tar on a dock. My dad was in the Navy, and we go down to see him off on the ship, you know, and that smell of tar on a dock, it just takes me back to a lot of years. What's can you have any smells that, think about it a second. Any odors that, yeah.
My mother used to make big batches of barbecue for our business, and so that barbecue cooking for hours in the oven.
My mouth's watering. See, that sounds good.
Indeed.
Yeah. And to convey that into words, it's never easy, but by golly, it's kind of cool when you do it. Touch. I got one thing in a story. I don't remember which story it was. Get that point. It was one called Courting Carrie in Wonderland. I'll be talking about that this afternoon extensively, about the research, how that came to be. But there's a tough point in the story where they have to part company. He's in big trouble with the Army. He's got to go down to Fort Clark in Texas from Yellowstone Park. And they're walking down there at the lower falls of the Yellowstone. Most of you have probably been to Yellowstone, those magnificent lower falls. He takes his glove off, or his gauntlet, and he holds her hand, and she's so relieved to feel his hand. and not his glove, you know, touch, things like that. And the things, yeah, just sight, things you see, things you, visual things that stick out from your own experiences. Sight. Think about that a second. Something you have seen that you can't unsee, or whatever it might be. Now we've all got, okay, someone's got a good one there on the front line right now. Share if you dare.
My friend sent me this picture, and because she knows I like everything with like pumpkin spice and everything, and it was this guy who had a pumpkin on his head. He had like pumpkins all over his body, and he's just laying in a pumpkin patch, and you can't unsee that.
Oh, good one. Well, I remember years ago there was a fold out of Burt Reynolds lying naked, and it was a fold out of some woman's magazine, and everything is strategically placed, but you don't unsee that sucker. But changing the sight to the word, that's the skill of the writer, and it takes, I learn from every book I write, every single book, and I'm up to 42 now, I think, actually, by the time this crazy spring's over. I learn every day, like Craig Johnson, listening to him, that dialogue in Longmire, not a wasted word in the world. And something important, don't interrupt your characters when they take a flight of their own. Now, years ago, I was getting the Spur Award, my first one. I sat down next to a guy named Frank Roderus. Now, Frank Roderus was a great Western writer. Maybe it was pulpy fiction. He was good. I enjoyed him. And I'm sitting there next to him thinking, this is this man I admire. And he said, sometimes your characters will just do what they want, and you just go with it. And I'm saying, I'm nodding, yes, sir. And I'm thinking to myself, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. How does that happen? It can't. But yeah, it does. It does. I have a novel. I wrote it years ago. I have a friend, every time I see her, she says, when is that coming out? It was never accepted by a publisher for probably one reason. It's kind of long. And it's between literary and commercial. As you know, there's a difference. You probably do. I'm no English major. I had to have somebody tell me what a trophy was. I never heard of a beta reader before. What's that? I was right, yeah. I do the writing, no one else does, or thinks did before. Anyway, but whatever. But there I was with this crazy idea, and I'm writing the story, and I need somebody to carry this woman across a stream. It's said in 1212 in Spain, when it's then conquered by the Moors, the southern part, the northern part, that they're trying to reconquer their own country, the Reconquistas. And just carry that woman across the stream. He wouldn't let go. And he became a major character in the story because I needed him at one point, and all of a sudden he was so interesting to me that he developed the backstory. I don't do that very often, but I really did it in that story. I've never forgotten that. Because let these people do their thing. Sometimes and you're probably thinking, yeah, she's crazy out of her mind. Like I was thinking of Frank Roderus, but trust me, it's true. So certain things will happen, they'll change your story. I wrote a novel called Doing No Harm, one of my favorite books, actually. It's set, you see, I write often in the Regency era, but it's seldom. I do not do balls, I do not do dukes. There are enough dukes in this world. There are far too many. If you're a historian, you know there never were that many dukes in England. That's stupid. So I don't bother with dukes. I like to write about more ordinary people in England. Was that Abraham Lincoln said, the Lord must have loved poor people, he made so many of them? I write about the ordinary folks. And lately, when I'm writing about the Royal Navy, and I've done that quite a lot, is I started out with the captains. Miss Whittier makes a list, has the captain, and he does have a small title. That was early in my Signet career. But I like to write about what they call the warrant officers. These are the men, these are the smart guys, and they still are. These are the guys that usually didn't come up Well, they came up, so to speak, through the ranks, many of them, depending on what they did. The Royal Navy surgeons were amazing men, who, surgeons and physicians, totally different. The surgeons learned on the job, the physicians went to University of Edinburgh or somewhere cool, and became, and their education was, the physician's education was theoretical. Surgeons got their hands bloody. They're the guys you want. But these are the men that were on the ships, surgeons. And so I thought, okay, I gotta set it in a regency, because somebody wants a regency. But I do it my way. You can do that when you're old enough and mean enough, and you've written enough books and have some readers. So I wanted to set a story about a surgeon in the Royal Navy who has swallowed the anchor. He's retired. The Napoleonic Wars are finally over after a generation of fighting. It's 1816 in this case. He wants to find himself a medical practice in a place where nothing ever happens. Because he's been 20 years on ships where everything happens all at once. He can't control anything. He wants to just take a deep breath. But he wants to keep being a doctor. He's good. He's good at it. So he wants to find a place where nothing ever happens. Okay. There's no novel in that, where nothing ever happens. So I had all kinds of ideas. He's going to end up in a small fishing village on the southwest coast of Scotland. My relatives came from there. The town's called Kirkcudbright. It's spelled Kirkcudbright, so I named it Edinburgh because nobody can pronounce Kirkcudbright right. Anyway, he shows up and something happens immediately, which brings me to probably my first point. One of my many points. Pardon I'm not from Utah. I don't mind. Fiction is one damn thing after another. Right? Right. Nod your heads. Right. Okay. One damn thing after another. And if you don't have that, you don't have a story. Because people don't read when nothing happens. I knew I needed something else in this story. Now, I've done a lot of research before I started. I think, what? So I'm reading in Scottish history. And if I had begun to write the thing, because I could do the first part of it easy enough. He's on his way to Scotland. He says he doesn't want to ever see the ocean again, never. And but he finds every little village he stops in, he finds the highest point, and he's looking for that water, you know. So we're thinking, oh man, I'm screwing this up right now, and I can't even retire right like us. Like we couldn't retire right. But so I'm reading. So you can research, but you keep researching while you're writing. Then I finally realized what it was. At the same time in Scotland, there's something called the Great Clearance going on. I even get angry just thinking about it. Excuse me, roughly 1790 to about 1860, kind of petered out. The people in the northern part of Scotland, in the Highlands, many of them were, many of them didn't even speak English, it gave it. You have the lairds and you have the clans. My own clan is the Ferguson clan. You have the clans, and you have the Duchess of Sutherland, who is a laird / sort of. She's married to a very rich English Mennonite, and the name blanks out right now. She realized that if you can run sheep, a certain brand of sheep in Scotland, you can make far more money than if you had these little crofters that are part of the clan living on lands. They pay their taxes, they have a couple cows, they have some sheep. So she, and others like her, they took the lead. They drove these people off their land. They gave them about a 3-month notice. They sent around a magistrate. You got 3 months. He's probably speaking to them in English. They don't even know what's going on. Many didn't leave, so finally soldiers came and drove them off their land. Many came, they drove them to the sea is what they did. I guess they were going to drown them there. Who knew? They didn't care. They wanted to run their sheep. If you go to Scotland today in the Highlands, it's still empty. It's called the Great Empty, the Great Clearance. So many of these people that could took ship, either that or jump in the ocean and satisfy your landlord. They took ship and they came many to Canada, Nova Scotia, New Scotland. Other places, Canada owes so much to these refugees and to the United States. But my relatives, other of these Scottish people just drifted south. They came down into the lowlands of Scotland, where my people were from, to a little place like, Edgar. I've been there to that fishing village. I've been to that place where my relatives came from. And what happens now? So then you come into the next part, I didn't have a note up here. There's a big sign, put it on your head. What if we have all these people drifting south, coming to a small fishing village, which by the end of the Napoleonic Wars, things had kind of, the whole country was tired. The men were gone, they weren't coming back, some did, the industry had left, The fishing village is this way, that they at one time had a fairly prosperous business in building ships, mostly fishing ships. But then all those men went to Glasgow to work up there, had the River Clyde to work up there in the larger enterprises that built the warships that fought against Napoleon. So the little town is suffering, and these refugees are coming. They don't speak much English. They're strange, and they're desperate, and they're starving, and they're dying. And these Southerners are, what do we do? So did I have a story now? Yeah. So don't interrupt your characters when they take a flight of their own. So we had this surgeon now who wants to leave. He wants to find that perfect village, a perfect place where nothing ever happens, but everything's happening now and he can't leave. And he's got his own issues, big ones. So anyway, on you go. Yeah, I had a plot. I had more plot than I ever needed, but it was great. Okay, important thing here now. Don't break the rules when you haven't fully figured them out yet. What this means in a weird way is exactly that. To break a rule, a grammar rule, a construction rule, or whatever rule, you must first fully grasp what the rule is, understand the impact of breaking it on the overall word. And I'm saying sometimes something as simple as a non-sentence. My first few stories, they're complete sentences, because I need to obey the rules. I need to learn them real well. But then you decide if it's truly necessary. And then if it makes sense to break a rule, then you do it. I can do that now. See, I've earned the badge. I can do whatever I want. And I did that in the last, a novel. I got to get a little plug for it because I'm so proud of this novel. You know, you think you get excited when you get that first book in your hand. It never ends. Actually, Jennifer is my cohort in crime in this one. We were asked to write a Christmas short story in this collection, Timeless Romance Anthology. Josie Kilpack, Carla Kelly, and Jennifer Moore. And I wrote a story based on something my daughter had told me years ago. How's my time coming here, folks? When's this session end?
You've got 20 minutes.
20 minutes? My word. Okay. And she had, when she was 15, she came to me one day and said, "Mom, I'm going to tell you something." I said, "You know what?" And they figured you think, "Oh, what are you going to tell me?" Okay. When she was 10 days old, we had moved from, my husband was finishing his doctorate. We had moved from Provo to Ogden. He was teaching at Weber State. She was 10 days old. Oh, I love moving when your kids are tiny. Anyway, she was the fourth of 5 children. And yeah, we moved on and on. Neighbors helped us move in, and on we went. She said, "Mom, I remember something you need to know." Okay, what it was? She said, "I remember lying in my crib and looking up, and there was a woman there, and you were there, and the woman had a large wart by the side of her nose, and she looked at me and said, 'What a pretty baby.'" My first thought is, "Sarah, you can't possibly be remembering that," because I remembered that after she said that, but I know better than to discount my kids. So I said, "Okay, you remember that." And you know how it is when things happen in your family and you have an incident that you never forget. Let's say, for example, the Thanksgiving that Grandma dropped the turkey on the floor and nobody knew about it except you, so you rushed around and cleaned it up, and suddenly everybody came in and they saw the turkey on the floor and everybody had a big laugh. And you know, even if you weren't there, if you hear that story enough, you feel like you were there because you've heard it so much. This thing Sarah was telling me had nothing to do with anything. It was not an event. She said there was a window right there, wasn't there? I said, "Yeah, there was, Sarah." And, so she had an early childhood memory. And since she told me that, I believed her, and I know she did. Because as I've spoken at groups and I've asked people, do you have a memory like that? Do any of you have a memory like that? What is it?
I was adopted, and I remember being held in my birth mother's arms. She gave me a lecture about boys.
Smart woman.
And I knew where, I was in a rocking chair and where the door was, and I didn't meet my birth mother till about 10 or 11 years ago. And I asked her, did this happen? And she said, yes, I gave you quite a lecture.
Okay.
And so I had to be less than a week old.
Getting those chills, guys? Jill?
Mine isn't that yet, but I remember being in a backpack on my father's back when he was out hand milking cows, and he left the dairy farm to go to school to become a doctor when I was about 4 months old. So, but I remember being there on his back and
Yeah.
watching him.
It happens now and then, not everybody does this, some people remember those things. So I thought, she told me that, I thought, okay, I got a character. He's a sailing master, one of those warrant officers, he's 26, he's very young to be a sailing master. The man is genius, that's what he is. But he was a workhouse bastard found on the steps, freezing cold in January or February, on the steps of a church, and he was found by the parish minister, taken inside and taken to the workhouse. They gave him a name. They didn't think he was the 6th bastard of the year, so his last name is Six. This happened. And they thought he would die, because he was freezing, but he didn't, so they named him Durable. Durable Six. Everybody calls him Abel, for obvious reasons. He wants to be called Durable, based on what my daughter told me. So I took an event that she had, and I used it like that. And I got deeply into the story, and I realized, oh, hey, I have got a novel here. This is not just a story. So I contacted Heather Moore, and she's so kind. She said, Heather, I have at least a trilogy, a book, about these two characters and the woman he meets. Can I have permission?